Oh my god, it's never ending. Even though I officially finished the franchise when I reviewed the reboots, I figured with how much time I have put into this franchise already, I am going to review everything about it. Well, except that. Well, yeah, that too. I don't even do comic books! This is actually going to be a two-part video because this documentary as a whole is near 6.5 hours long. And since I don't really know how to review documentaries, luckily this one is split up in sections where they talk about this movie, and then this movie, and then this movie. So that's how I'm gonna split this up. But before I do, there's just a couple of things I need to get out of the way.
You guys all know the story of Camp Crystal Lake, right? I mean, come on, surely you have to know about the legend.
Corey frickin' Feldman is the narrator for this. Could they have gotten anybody better? The answer is no. And also,
a lot of us relate to Jason because Jason is the outcast. Like in school, either you're too tall, you're too short, you're too heavy, you have buck teeth, you speak with a lisp. We all tie in somehow going, oh, I understand that I was a different kid. It's just a basic part of the human struggle.
That's the guy who plays Jason in the reboot. And I'm kind of worried about him because who the hell relates to Jason Voorhees? If any of you just raised your hand to that, seek help. Here we go with the behind the scenes for part 1. Now keep in mind this is a long documentary, so I can't touch on everything. I'm just going to touch on the stuff that I found interesting. Sean Cunningham, who created Friday the 13th, actually started off as a softcore porn director and didn't get his feet wet with horror until he made Last House on the Left with Nightmare on Elm Street's own Wes Craven. And that's not the only tie-in that Friday the 13th has with original slasher movies.
Sean called me up and said, Halloween is making incredible money at the box office, let's rip it off. That is keeping it real.
That's right. Friday the 13th purposefully rips off John Carpenter's Halloween. And if you really wanted to stretch for it, you can make another connection to a classic horror film with this, Cannibal Holocaust. And the reason I say that is because Cannibal Holocaust received some controversy for killing actual animals on screen. And well,
it was a real snake, and he was chopped into bits.
Yeah. With Jason Voorhees' mother being the killer in this movie, which, spoilers, I guess, they do focus on Betsy Palmer for this sequence in the documentary. And as it turns out, she hated the script for this movie. She thought it was garbage. She was like, oh, what is all this death? This is awful. I hate this. For the second film, nobody wanted to make this movie. They all thought it was pointless because who are they going to have the killer be? Jason? What? He was a kid that drowned. What are you talking about? So Sean Cunningham, who made the first one, dropped out. He didn't want to do it. The MPAA brutally attacked this movie, just like it would with further entries in the franchise, because even though one of the favorite kills among fans and the crew alike, the one where Tom McBride, the kid in the wheelchair, gets a machete straight across the face and then wheels down backwards across a flight of stairs, there was a scene where the couple in bed gets speared through with a spear and it like shish kebabs them. That scene went on a lot longer, but the MPAA had them cut it. So you don't even see the spear going through them. And that was just among one of the few and tame cuts that the MPAA was going to take against this franchise. The beginning of Part 3 was actually going to be very similar to Halloween Part 2. Imagine that. That's obviously how it not turned out, because it turned into Jason killing counselors in the woods, but in 3D. They actually tried really hard with this 3D because they were the first film ever to use this specific camera, the Luna crane. It was constantly breaking. The actors were having a really hard time working with the camera whenever they would have to do something in a very specific spot for the camera so that it would give that 3D effect. Specifically in a scene where Shelley, R.I.P., has to throw a wallet. He said that it took him several takes just to get throwing a wallet done correctly. Another thing that Part 3 is famous for is being the first movie where Jason gets his hockey mask. What's funny about that though is they knew they had to get him a new mask because the potato sack was ruined in Part 2. And so they were just coming up with ideas, and somebody who happened to be a hockey fan on the set brought in a hockey mask and they just went with that. That was the only thought process put behind this mask that would become synonymous with the character for many years to come. This was actually supposed to be the ending of the franchise. But it made so much money that it knocked E.T. off of its #1 spot in the box office. So what did we get? Around this time, slasher movies were getting destroyed by critics. So the crew decided that this was definitely going to be the last one, and they were going to go out with a bang. Tom Savini returned for this film to do the gore effects again, and he even had a character named after him, Tommy Jarvis.
I remember walking into the casting office and going, Friday the 13th? I thought this was for Halloween. And they were like, no, it's Friday the 13th. And I was like, oh, right, of course, I knew that.
Corey Feldman. Oh.
I was an 11-year-old boy. I'm like, I get to do scenes with boobies. Not much has changed.
Damn it, Corey Feldman, you are a gem to humanity. Just don't make any more music, though, because no, don't do that. Apparently filming this movie really sucked because the budget only allowed for a house that was really small in comparison to what they wanted. Plus, it was constantly raining and freezing. One girl actually got hypothermia while she was shooting a scene where she's naked on a raft. It got so bad that Ted White, the guy who plays Jason, actually threatened to quit if the director didn't start taking better care of his actors so that they wouldn't get sick. There's a scene in this movie where the character of Teddy gets super stoned and then Jason kills him. Actor Lawrence Monason actually got incredibly stoned for this scene and then got way too high and freaked out and was almost too paranoid to shoot the scene. Speaking of death scenes, the MPAA was brutal to this movie. Almost everything they did was going to give them an X rating, so they were just trimming down everything that they could because they wanted to make sure that Jason's death scene was seen in its entirety. Corey Feldman was actually supposed to be in further installments, but instead we got Part 5, where Corey Feldman just makes a cameo at the very beginning, because he really wanted to be in this one. But instead, he was obligated to be in this little film called Goonies or something, and he had to do that instead. They actually got another director for this one, who in the past, like Cunningham, made porn. And he wanted to make this one a whodunit, just like the original one. Apparently, though, he was horrible to work with. Everyone hated the experience of working with this man. Again, the MPAA was treacherous against this movie, despite the fact that it still has the highest body count of them all and is considered the most sleazy. Seriously, there's a character in this movie. They chose the actress based on how, well endowed she was. Besides that, I don't have much to say about this one except the fact that Everybody hated the ending. The fake out, ooh, Tommy Jarvis is gonna be the next Jason ending. I hated it too. I don't like this movie. Moving on. At this point, the fans were pissed about what they got with Part 5. So Paramount told them, get back on track. And so, they got a director that was going to make this a dark comedy. This is, though, the only Friday the 13th movie with no boobs in it. Plus, there's actual children in this one. And people were worried that they were actually going to kill children, which they didn't do. I mean, they did kill a snake, so I don't really see how that's how I can compare those two. Let's move on. An alternate ending for this movie was actually going to introduce Jason's father and was going to put forth the idea that he was the reason that Jason was this evil and he might have done something so that Jason was this unstoppable. But they had them cut it because they didn't want that heavy of a subplot to be in there distracting from Jason. So instead they just put it in one of the comic books. I think it would have been really rad though, but that's just me. Well, that wraps up the first 6 movies that this documentary covers, and I've still got 4 more for them to talk to me about. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe so that I can see you guys next time.